Okay, we're doing something a little bit different this fall on the Gravity Podcast. We're launching a series featuring interviews with the experts from our Grow Transformational Wellness Program, exclusively for residents of our greenhouse community. The year-long program is made up of monthly learnings designed to help residents build habits for a better life. Each month, a new wellness topic is introduced by an expert in that area. I'm excited for you to hear from each guest on their journey to becoming an expert and finding their passion for helping others through wellness practice. Tune in this fall to hear their inspiring stories. For more information on the Grow program, visit livinggreenhouse.com. As I said, this program is exclusively for our greenhouse residents. Today, please, if you have somebody that's interested in looking for a community like Greenhouse, please check out the website and shoot us a note if this is something that you'd like to learn more about as a non-resident. We're also considering potentially over time expanding this program outside of the physical community and into our virtual community as well. So enjoy our guests, our experts, and check us out at livinggreenhouse.com. Okay, this week's guest on the Gravity Podcast is Cary Davis. Cary is a friend who joined me on the podcast to talk about his journey. Cary is the founder of the Transcendental Meditation Center here in Columbus, located inside the Gravity community. Cary is a certified TM teacher who I met through my own meditation practice and have since been able to welcome him as part of our Gravity community, as well as join us as the mindfulness and meditation expert for the Grow Transformational Wellness Program at our greenhouse community. I really appreciate Cary joining me and sharing his story. He's a really wonderful, kind, loving man who's deeply thoughtful, insightful, and has been a huge part of my life, and it's just an honor to know him and to be working with him and to be with him and share his journey here with you on the Gravity Podcast. Yeah, we're here today with Cary Davis. Cary, it's awesome to finally get a chance to take some time to share you and your journey with the audience.
I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, and we were just talking, you are our meditation expert for the Grow program at Greenhouse, and you were sharing with me some thoughts you had about, kind of the program as a whole and how, it could be beneficial for a lot of things. And it's interesting, just as a starting place, because I am actually, you mentioned like a high school class or something, and I've been working on something like that. And I think it's a great place to start more to think about it, because it came to me, this idea, through meditation. And the idea that I've been working on is, when I was in high school, there was a program called Group. And Group was essentially group therapy. I've talked about it on the podcast, I think, before. And you didn't really know it because you were just like a high school kid and you got pulled out of class and you're in this group of peers, and it was led by a guidance counselor. And really what it was, you were sharing whatever was going on in your life and things you didn't really necessarily talk about with your friends and with other people, maybe with your parents, depending on what your situation was. And it was like this, kind of eclectic group of mostly like troubled kids, but they sprinkle in like a few normal kids, as decoys. And anyways, it was very impactful for me. And coming out of COVID, I had this idea that at Bexley High School, they should reboot, which is where I went to school. They should reboot this idea of group. And one thing's led to another, and they're actually now forming a class. It's taken a number of turns, and there's a lot of awesome people involved, and I'm just playing a small role in it. It's not group as I experienced it, but they are actually building a class where the kids will learn some modalities.
Beautiful.
Things like mindfulness.
Yes.
And, have an opportunity to learn about
mental health and
Yeah.
all the variety of things that we can do to support ourselves in our lives. And it's, I think it's like more of like a happiness kind of thing. And, what does that mean? And how do you go about it through service? And anyway, so, Grow is kind of our version of that within, our communities, where we're trying to find all these simple habits for people to ultimately go through some sort of supportive, transformative experience.
Yes.
For whatever they're trying to go about in their day-to-day lives.
It's so needed. Where do we get that? You get the guidance that you get at home growing up, but then at school, and this how to navigate life, how to navigate your own development in life, how to be your best. I mean, it sounds corny to say, but it's not systematically presented any place. So to be part of putting a program together like that, it's so needed in education.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the idea for that course, and it is really, are we teaching kids the things that they need to learn?
Yeah.
And at a basic level, I think we all need to be learning the foundational tools in which we need to be able to navigate life.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to, learn the sciences, or you want to, learn, be a mathematician, or whatever you want to study, so that you can learn and grow and, maybe, use it in your career. Great. But do you have the foundational tools as a human being to navigate life beyond your work, or within your work even, right?
Both things. How to show up for yourself and your family, your work, how to maximize human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even you asked me as we sat down, and how am I doing? And I jokingly said to you, I have this little trick, it's called meditation, and it helps me, every day. But it's true. I mean, I've talked about this, and we've talked about this, and actually, I was just having this conversation with one of my sons. I mean, no question, of all the things. And of all the things, even within the Grow program, and all the other things that I've done and to grow and to learn and to heal, the meditation has been the consistent that gives me the most, day in and day out, and certainly over time. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'd love to maybe just back up for a minute,
good,
and kind of do what we do here. Because for those people that don't know you are not just our meditation expert at Grow and Greenhouse, you're a transcendental meditation teacher.
Yes.
You have a center here at Gravity, and you have been deeply involved in that work for decades.
Right.
But let's start at the beginning. Who was Cary Davis long before he was this meditation guru?
A small G.
Okay.
Teacher. Good. I'm thinking about us having some exchange about this, and it's been great because I've thought a little bit about it in a different way than I had before. Being born in 1948, it was a different world.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Huntington, West Virginia, in a neighborhood that was full of kids, like, just actually looked like a neighborhood you might see in Clintonville. Solid middle class, but, houses on standard lots. The combination elementary and junior high school, lower and middle school, were about 6 blocks away. And I walked there for 9 years. And I went there with kids from the neighborhood, and they almost all looked alike. There were no dark-skinned people. There were no Asian. It was just so homogenous you couldn't imagine, and that was life. And I didn't think anything about it because there wasn't anything beyond that that I was being exposed to. And there were a lot of, in that, going to lower school in the 1950s, in a neighborhood where every family that I was aware of, Mom was at home, Dad went out the door in the morning to work, came back at 5 or 5:30, dinner at 6, and my experience growing up, there was a lot of blessings in that.
Tell me a little bit about your family in particular.
Yeah. One brother, my mom and dad stayed married, and there was a flow of life that we were in that was just very common at that time. And my mother loved being a mother and a wife. She didn't have any, that I'm aware of, she didn't have any conflict with that, like, oh, I should be doing something else. In fact, I can remember her saying at one time, the happiest time of my life was when you and your brother were kids, raising you. And, well, that in itself, and to have on the surface, a completely stable home life. And it's not to say that, my mom and dad, like every human being that I've ever met, they're finding their way in this life.
Sure.
And as a kid, you just think, oh, they know everything, and this is the way it is. There was a lot of stability at home. And as I've gotten older, the depth of that good fortune, of that blessing, of having a stable home life. And it's not to say my dad had issues that he was working through, my mom as well, but it was stable, and they were devoted to being married and to being parents. And that was not unlike all the other families in the neighborhood. And all the other families in the neighborhood had their ups and downs. But as I look back, my parents grew up in the Depression. And the level of, they were teenagers, 1930. And the level of uncertainty in society, I'm not aware that either one of their families were ever, in bread lines, that kind of thing. But that level of uncertainty, my father fought in the Second World War, was wounded, came home with a Purple Heart, almost lost his arm. His dad passed when he was a teenager, completely unexpectedly, suddenly. That's a lot to navigate.
Yeah. But you as a kid experienced them, sounds like very lovingly and very well adjusted.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Which is interesting. I mean, a lot of people who grew up, with all of that background, war and
heavens.
It was, not a common story. No, I mean, who knows what else was going on, but, they presented to you at a minimum.
Yes.
As being together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think children, you would know this very well, children have radar for what's really going on. I couldn't have verbalized it as a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
That, hey, there's stuff going on under the... under the surface, but there is for everybody. And I think when I went through a time as a teenager thinking, oh, my parents don't know anything.
Uh-huh.
And then I got a little older and I thought they knew a whole lot.
Yeah.
And
well, what were you like as a teenager? What was teenage Cary Davis?
Whoa. Brett, I was acutely unsure of myself.
Yeah.
And my goal in life was to fit in.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I can just be around the right people at school.
Yeah.
And so that was that, through elementary school, it was kind of a lighthearted thing. But by middle school, when you're trying to get girls' attention and competing with all the other guys who are trying to get the girls' attention, I just was, I was desperately trying to fit in, and wasn't easy. I wasn't athletic. I did well in school. School came easily, but I never was motivated to excel at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was kind of floating along, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, not uncommon, for teenagers to be unsure of themselves and, but how did that show up for you? Were you just kind of floating around, or were you acting out, or what was?
Yeah. I was mainly floating around. When we got driver's licenses, all the guys the handful of guys that I hung out with, it was kind of like NASCAR. All the time, every place. Yeah. And it was, not everybody survived it. And I had a good friend and another friend who were drinking one evening and took the notion to go to the beach. And a couple hours out, driver fell asleep. Tom was in the driver's seat. That was the end of him. And so I think of it just grace of God that I survived that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I won't make you get into any more specifics.
Yeah.
We all probably, have those stories and, different times and, yet, that's, what happens when you're young and unsure of yourself and figuring things out, and it often does feel like the grace of God. I certainly feel that way when I look back at, the way I behaved during those years.
Yeah.
So tell me, as you move through high school and kind of beyond, you said that you, school came easy. Did you go on to college and
I did.
Continue your studies?
But after a couple of semesters, and I was just in college really with no clear direction, and Vietnam was raging, and they were starting to draft people, not only into the Army, but the Marines, and I knew that I didn't want to be on the ground in Vietnam. So after a couple of semesters of college and things were going downhill fast, I joined a fraternity. That didn't help with stability or now I was feeling more comfortable with myself, but I was in an environment that was, it was I started college in 66, 67, and, drugs and alcohol and just that whole scene.
Yeah.
And so grades were declining, and I thought I could get to the place where I get a notice for Vietnam, and so I enlisted in the Air Force. And the day after that enlistment started, 4 years seemed like a lot longer than it did when I signed up, as a way to dodge all the things that I wasn't dealing with at age 20. So I had 4 years in the Air Force. Again, grace of God, I was stationed in Europe. And when I got out of the Air Force, came back to finish college and saw a poster that said Transcendental Meditation. And I thought, well, that could be interesting. Just completely out of curiosity.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never heard you say that, but that, that's how it came to me too. It was through that poster.
And how many people at Ohio, you were at Ohio State?
Yeah, at that point.
How many people do you think walked past those and didn't pull it?
Most people, yeah.
I was on a campus with, 9,000 students.
Mm-hmm.
There were 6 or 7 people in the introductory discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think...
Yeah, and what was it for you that kind of got you to respond to that? What do you remember what it was that caught you?
Brett, honestly, it was the knowledge. It was this clear description that human potential is something much more noble, vast, and empowering than I had ever heard about from any direction, at church, at home, in school. And a clear description that there is a real level of individual existence that is whole and pure, and a fountainhead of creative energy, of connectedness, of self-assuredness, that is intended to be lived, directly experienced, not just some affirmation like, oh, I'm a part of the universe and there's a reason I'm here. And those are nice thoughts, but it's a totally different thing, of course, as you know, to have an experience within yourself where you feel like that inner lively silence is that you're not separate from something that is vast.
Mm-hmm.
So that I thought, I'm interested to know more about that. And I started the technique. The experiences that I had initially were not flashy at all, but right away I was having experiences that were different than anything else I'd experienced.
Well, let me ask you something, because this came up with my last guest. He was talking about Christianity and his relationship with Jesus in particular. And I was kind of getting curious with him about, what it's like when he talks about, Jesus speaking to him. And so I'm curious, when you, there's a lot of things that, I think about when I think about the experience of meditation, but to kind of start with, when you see this poster,
right?
Okay, and you described like the language on the poster to be of intrigue to you, right?
Yeah.
That sounds great. That what you're reading there, the vastness, all the things that it could do for you.
Yeah,
that was enough to get your attention. But in hindsight, do you feel any like that was some sort of a calling and from and I don't know what your beliefs are around God or the universe or energy, right? But did it feel a part of something greater to see this poster?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But not at the time.
Right.
At the time, it was just, I'm going to look in on this.
Yeah.
It was, evening discussion, come one, come all.
Mm-hmm.
But now looking back at it, and I think about this as, I think I don't know exactly how it works, but I think our human journey is, to one degree or another, a lot of moments where something inside the individual clicks with somebody you've met, a poster you've seen, an idea that comes to you, something that's mentioned in a classroom, but something resonates inside. And that resonance, I think, is part of developing, being human.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things happen because they're supposed to happen.
Yes. And that's kind of why I was thinking about this past guest and his relationship with Jesus, because I kind of think we all call that different things.
Yeah.
Right. But, as you're describing it, a poster, a conversation, right? When you kind of tune into that,
Yeah.
when you notice it, when you're aware of it, when you start to align with it, to me, those things all feel pretty spiritual,
Completely.
right? Like there's,
Yeah.
Something of a higher power.
Right.
I just call it God, but whatever. It's this energy that is at work,
Yes.
right? And I know we can maybe come back to this as we go through your journey, but to me, that one of the greatest things about meditation is it allows you to be more present with those things.
Yes.
Notice them, right?
More awake to them.
Yeah, more awake to them.
And it fine tunes your antenna.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. I was just curious, so you go to the introduction.
Yes.
And you learn and you started to describe that, initially it's not some big,
Right. Wasn't
wow
flashy.
experience, flashy. Yeah. So tell me, how does it continue to unfold for you?
But this, Brett, what you're pointing to, it's so great because what happened from that time was that there was just step by step, there was such reinforcement, support, good things happening that I just so much over the coming months, the next few years, and I got involved in a program for training to get to study with Maharishi to be certified as a teacher. It's just doors opened, right person at the right place. The itinerant teacher, this was a TM teacher from Washington, D.C. There was, in the town that I was in, Huntington, West Virginia, Marshall University, and there was somebody there my age who had learned TM at American University in D.C., came back to Huntington and wanted his brother to start. So he calls the D.C. Center and says, I'll put up posters on campus if you'll send a teacher. Mm-hmm. The teacher that came is the one that I learned from, and he was sleeping on the floor of a student's apartment. And I was house sitting, family, friends. I came back from the service, and in Huntington, West Virginia, it was something of a mansion, like 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, large house, big wraparound porch on a half an acre. And I was up there by myself, and I said to the TM teacher, hey, I've got room. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, that'd be great, be an upgrade. Well, then I've got a TM teacher under the same roof.
Yeah.
And he had tapes, materials. I had lots of questions. Mm-hmm. And like that, and we became friends. He was my age, but he seemed like a big brother. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was the knowledge. There were dots connected in his awareness that I thought, how do you just connections between individual life and society that I had never thought about before at all. And and then weekend retreats and meeting other people. And I just was, for the first time in my life, I was feeling connected and on to something that was meaningful and that I could, talking to people, teaching, that fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I actually was just thinking sort of the irony of the dots that connected to have, you here and the way that our, dots have connected.
Great example.
And so my story, as but, for the audience to connect this, the story I had is, when I learned, and I think the way a lot of people were learning here locally, was in a environment that I found to be less than ideal. Yeah. Hotel conference rooms and, kind of rented out spaces and shopping centers and things that just weren't quite as aesthetically nice, and there wasn't a local teacher here in Columbus at the time either.
Right.
So somebody would come from Akron or Youngstown, to do it periodically. And so, I learned that way. And through the years of using the technique of meditating, got the clarity to want to create spaces where people had the ability to learn a lot of things, with easy access to where they lived and in spaces that were more helpful to facilitating a good experience. And so, one of those things was TM. And so, that's kind of how you've landed here at Gravity.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just, it's just real examples, yours and mine, of how, when these dots start to connect, how you can go on to create things that, have, and you'll send me emails and stuff about things you're doing I don't even know that are happening anymore, but it takes on a whole life of itself.
Yes. Yes.
We connected some dots and you're connecting dots and it keeps going and going.
Brett, when you pull back and look at it, you and me sitting here, this moment, having this conversation, what are the odds?
Right.
I mean, you couldn't calculate them.
Right. We both responded to some poster probably, I don't know how many years apart, 30, 40, whatever it was. Right. And here we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
pretty.
And you and your path, and how many people in between Huntington, West Virginia and Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah.
And
and then there's all the other people that, have had that same experience with you. This is the cool thing. So you started talking about like teaching, and I am curious about your path and how you have really made this your life's work. Right. So for me, I'm a meditator, and I, have collaborated with you to, create a center here and proponent and, play my role. But this is your life. You made this your life's work.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of curious about how you, continued down the path to make that choice, that this was really what I think is like your purpose here in this lifetime.
Yep. Yeah, me too, very much. And in those days, at a weekend retreat, there might be 50 meditators. And there were teachers there that had spent time with Maharishi and videotapes of Maharishi. And I don't know, it may sound kind of cultish, but I don't think it was. I mean, that wasn't the net result. And I saw that there was such a diversity of people and that were learning, and there was such excitement about the impact, the potential impact in individual life and what that ultimately could mean in society if more and more people were the best of themselves, systematically getting rid of accumulated stress and fatigue, anxiety. And so being at those weekend retreats, I just thought, what could be better than teaching this to other people? And there was a systematic program. There was a month-long in-residence program, of all places, at the University of Maine, Orono, Maine. So I was there the summer after I learned TM for that, and special speakers, national speakers, and the more that I got into the knowledge, and there was a lot along with all of the traditional knowledge of meditation and human potential, there were all these scientific studies that were starting to come out to verify that something real and measurable was happening when you meditated, and that it was producing benefits that were verifiable after meditation. So there was a cadre of scientists, people with reputations, published researchers that were saying, "Hey, we're on to something here." And then Maharishi, of course, was the Brett, I think honestly, the ultimate entrepreneur. It just never missed an opportunity, and such energy and organizing power. I shouldn't say ultimate entrepreneur, because your definition of that would be much more accurate and experienced than mine. But Maharishi was he was on fire.
Yeah, he was an innovator. He was I don't know like the business behind it, but he was certainly a high level creator.
Yes.
Yeah. And could you speak to your experiences with him?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. I don't know if we've talked about that either, but
yeah,
definitely spent time with him. You were around him
a little bit, and it started in the summer of 1973, and I was starting to think, okay, I'm gonna look into this, pursue this as a career path. And Maharishi was speaking to the National Conference of Higher Educators, college administrators and professors in Chicago, which was about a 5-6 hour drive from Huntington, where I was. And I thought, well, let's go see him. So there were 3,000 people in that audience, and I was one of them. And again, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't flashy. It wasn't like, oh, I'm seeing light or something. But I was seeing somebody that was completely different than anybody else I had ever seen on TV, in person. I was seeing somebody who moved physically and emotionally, psychologically, as much as I could see, in a light way, and then had this laser focus. This combination of taking it easy and just in answering questions from the press, presenting himself to this huge audience. And I thought, well, this, I'm ready to apply to study to be a teacher. And that led to a course in Europe, in France, small place in eastern France. And Maharishi came to that course. And from there, over the next decade, there were a handful of times that I had some interaction with him, either in a small group or individually. And when I talked to him individually, it was brief. Mm-hmm. And all of that just reinforced my experience that he was somebody that was living to a high degree what he was talking about, that there is the potential to have inside an invincible experience of freedom, of connectedness, of knowing I'm at the right place, doing the right thing right now, whatever that is, and of going from A to B. 2 million people at the time that I learned TM, maybe 2 million people worldwide had learned it. And Maharishi was thinking, okay, if 2 million people can learn it in the first 10, 12 years that I'm teaching, how can we double that in the next 3 years? And so it was exhilarating to be around. And the teacher training course itself, just more people who, I was with a group of 300-400 people that were, post-hippie, people that were ready to contribute to a higher quality of life for individuals and for society.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're sitting here today, day after the election, and, I think there's a lot of people who, are on one side or the other, right? They're either
Sure.
thinking this is the greatest thing to happen to the country, or they think it might be the worst thing. And of course, there's some people in the middle, but a lot of people have strong feelings about it. And I'm just thinking about that because it's top of mind, but also because you're talking about the 60s and hippies and people that are dedicated to bringing things like TM into the world in an effort to hopefully make a difference in to all of humanity.
Yes.
I mean, I think if I had to guess, when you say Maharishi wanted to see if he could double that in 3 years, it comes from a place of wanting to really make a massive improvement in the human experience and consequently change the world.
Yes.
Right. And so different, just very different times. I mean, that group of people was thinking about humanity in the way that I'm not sure we do today.
That there were people on that teacher training course that had graduated from Ivy League schools. I mean, all of them, Harvard, Yale, Cornell, people that had big open doors, significant open doors. And some of those people taught TM for a time and then went back to doing business or being a college professor or an attorney or whatever it was. But there were a lot of talented people. It was not in fact, Maharishi he really wanted to dissociate the movement and the teachers from the hippies.
Mm-hmm.
And all, because, you're trying to say to government and to education leaders and to health leaders, we've got something here that's solid.
And more maybe scientifically based than woo-woo.
Exactly.
Yeah. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit, because I think, my experience just being around the TM community, there is a heavy emphasis, several books have been written on it and on the science.
Right.
There is a pretty strong scientific background research, and this isn't, I think maybe as questioned today as maybe it was then. People know now there are scientific benefits to sitting calmly, to breathing, right? I mean, nobody's really arguing that, at least like they used to. But maybe you could, talk to how that scientific research, came about and made its way to where it is today, where it's more adopted.
Yeah. I think initially it was to give credibility to the practice, and that, science to one degree or another was the language of the time. And even maybe at that time in the 60s, early 70s, science and medicine had a much more in general favorable place in society. Doctors were idealized, I think, to some extent. They were seen as the people who could keep you healthy, and science. If there was good scientific research, that carried a lot of weight. So the idea, and actually Maharishi, I think to a large extent, he was the one that said right from the start, if this is real, if this whole idea of transcending, of waking up inner human potential, integrating it in your daily life and living it, if that's a real thing, if it's not woo-woo, then there's going to be measurable indicators. And let's do rigorous scientific research that can be published in peer-reviewed journals. So it started that way. And to some extent, that still exists. I mean, just about everybody that I see, and that's a handful to 2 handfuls of people a week, just about everybody that I see, to one degree or another, is aware that there's good research to support the claim that TM can be a piece of the puzzle for being your best self. But the science is always, there's a limit to how much you can measure the spirit. I mean, ultimately, that's not going to be, there's
right. It's interesting how you describe that, because I think it's honest, that the facts are, and I've seen this actually in other things like the psychedelic movement, the facts are, science is very much what our society and human beings can get their arms around, right? So it's like, I mean, there's a lot of things that probably fall into this category, but if you can scientifically prove it, then it's okay, right?
Yes.
And that has all these other impacts, insurance, or just socially acceptable, certainly into corporations, right?
Yes.
Well, it's scientifically proven. So yes, right, that you have to kind of play the game a little, right?
That's it.
And so I get why that was important, and it's not made up. I mean, you can actually, do research and show the results.
Yeah.
You have to, and that's even a little debatable, right? Because I heard yesterday that like the FDA, I think, approves 1/3 of the FDA approved drugs later get recalled. So, canceled or whatever right? So it's like, what does it take really to prove something scientifically? How, and there's all the other special interests in drug companies, and who knows, right? How things get scientifically, I know a story of a guy who, had some research essentially manufactured to get, a drug approved. Anyway, what's interesting though is in the case of TM,
right,
and maybe in other meditation techniques, but TM is the one that you and I are using. There's this spiritual thing which you can't really, scientifically.
Right.
It's not that. It's just not what it is. It's like trying to put, words to God, right?
Yes.
Or to a divine intelligence,
right?
It's beyond words, right? So you can't, right? So, and that is kind of, part of why I was asking about, what called you, and because you do get into that transcendent space, that level, that energy, and that is a spiritual space.
It's completely spiritual.
Yeah.
And it turns out that's the inner content of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that space, that inner content, it doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else, the physical body, our story in a given lifetime, it comes and goes.
Yeah.
So doesn't it make sense to make a priority, to the degree that's right for the individual, of cultivating awareness of that level? And this whole thing with science it's so much our time. We just live in a time that's so material.
Yeah.
And what you were saying, I think, is exactly right. It's a way of, it's kind of a shortcut in some ways of making decisions about things on a material basis. And whereas in a different time in society, I don't think any time recently, I mean in the last few hundred years, the idea that you would have to verify meditating, coming home to yourself, developing yourself at a deeper level, well, it's just which is why this circles back to why I think grow and what the impulse that you've had, Brett, is so it's so tremendous. This basic impulse of let's pay attention to who we are as whole human beings, and the challenge, the question, I think for everybody in one way or another is, how do I live a fulfilling life? How do I do justice to the talents, the gifts that I've been born with? And how do I navigate life in a way that brings happiness to myself, to the people around me, and hopefully contributes to more extended life? Not just my immediate family, but my extended family, my neighborhood, my city, etc. How do I live up to what I would say is God-given potential in every human being? And meditation is a piece of that puzzle. And I would say a key piece. Now, do you choose transcendental meditation? Maybe not. But if you, just with this paradigm, that there is this inner reality to human beings, whether you call it self with a capital S or pure consciousness or soul, whatever label you put on it, that level exists. It's part of human life. Transcending, it means coming out of the boundaries, the active surface level where you and I are talking right now, all the sense experience, see, hear, touch. How to come out of that level, allow the mind to settle down and reacquaint itself, reconnect itself, restore its natural connection to that inner level. Well, transcending, that's what... Now, then, if you look into it, I think the TM technique has a lot to recommend it in terms of safety, in terms of ease and naturalness. But there must be a lot of... Maharishi and TM don't have any patent on what we're talking about here. It's deeper personal growth. But just as you would if you were looking into new software or buying a new car or something material, you just look at what's the performance record, what's the cost value relationship. TM looks strong.
Yeah. I wanted to actually talk to you about that and how it compares to other techniques. But I want to come back to that because there's something else that was coming to me. And yesterday I was sitting with a friend, mentor, older man who's almost 90. And he was telling me, he was kind of giving me some wisdom, and he was saying that, he thinks that what matters in life, as he was reflecting back on his own life, is really to just have fun and be kind, or his words. And, I think about this sometimes, as we're busy doing whatever we're doing, right? Making whatever matter that we make matter. And sometimes, that might include why are we here? What's the purpose and meaning? I mean, I do this. I think, a lot of us do. And how am I going to make an impact? And if I'm here in this one life and I have a purpose, and I need to, and sometimes I when I think about, what he was saying yesterday, and I've thought about this, a lot. I mean, maybe there's really nothing that needs to be done, right? Maybe have fun, be kind. I don't know, just be present. And so, I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that. Somebody who's been meditating for as long as you have and doing what you do, and just, kind of this idea that, even as you describe Maharishi, we got to 2 million, well, how do we get to 4 million? Right. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about him, and obviously he was massively impactful, but, is there some sort of more, not enough, or was that a calling and purpose? And, just kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I think first with your friend, mentor, and have fun and be kind. I think a person can get a lot of mileage out of that in a lifetime. But have fun, what does that really mean? How do we metabolize have fun? Well, there's, feeling free, being in a position to do what you care to do, whether it's take a walk or build a business or have a wonderful family life, whatever those things are, all of that comes back to how we feel with ourselves inside. All of it, when all's said and done, I would say, either directly or indirectly, we are pursuing the feeling inside of fulfillment, that either I've done a good job or I've spent the afternoon with a few friends. We had lunch together, a lot of laughs, and it was great. But it all circles back to how that feeling is inside. And I would just say that with the kind of development that you're promoting at Grow for residents, that what happens, whatever from that menu of things, whatever they choose and use for deeper personal growth, that being happy expands and becomes more compassionate, more loving, more powerful. And that doesn't mean that sometimes they don't call up a friend and say, hey, have you got an hour? Let's go out and take a walk. I mean, it doesn't mean that life has to be this intensely goal-oriented, overly serious.
Yeah.
But I think built in is the potential for being happy to include our concern for others.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's good. It's an individual thing, and it can be anything, and it's almost about like what you bring to it more so than what it is. But I do ultimately think that whatever it is, at some point,
yes,
it does need to have at least some element of how is this helpful to other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's just more fulfilling.
Yeah.
It's not an intellectual thing.
Right.
It's not. Maharishi used to say that this is a good angle, I think, it's something that I wanted to be sure to bring out, because I enjoyed an interview that just in the last week that you had with a guest who said, I'm glad to know that there's a power outside of myself that's greater than myself. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that insight, but I would submit that you're not separate from that power.
Yeah. Right.
That imagining or thinking that that God is
separate. Yeah.
It's
the separation.
We're part of that.
Yeah.
We are. inseparably part of that.
Yeah.
And the more we live our own potential, the more that power is coming right through us.
Yeah, this is like I've been reading the Course of Miracles.
Oh,
and it's a big part of that.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And Return to Love, wasn't that a follow-up to
Yeah.
So that the more that we are self-awake, self with a capital S, the more that we're self-aware, the more we inevitably, in the way that's right for us, and it doesn't mean everybody. Maharishi's teacher was, here was Maharishi traveling the world and just thinking from every direction, what more can we do? And I think that was in terms of his role in this life. I mean, you would see him sometimes in a meeting, and somebody would say, Maharishi, it's Sarah's birthday. Stop everything, bring a cake, have a song, and not trying to be loose or in the moment, but just, okay, now this.
Right.
And then right back to what can we do to have a conference for leaders in the military to say there may be a way to prevent war.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's circle back around to the many now options. Last night, actually, the Calm meditation app had a great commercial on TV during the election results as they were coming in, and it was brilliant. I thought it was just simply said, we bought this ad so that you could have 30 seconds of silence, and it just basically was a blank screen for 30 seconds.
Oh, cool.
Flashed up. Right. So,
nice.
So, I've talked about this, there's a lot now happening in this space.
Oh yeah.
Right. And there are apps, Calm and Talkspace and others, in the mental health. And there's more meditation apps than I even know where to turn anymore.
Right.
You said something about the cost value.
Yes.
And also you mentioned this like culty thing, that maybe, I don't know if that's still a thing today, but maybe in the past there was some reputational questions about that. And I think still maybe people see, a picture of Maharishi and, Transcendental Meditation, what is it? And why do I have to go somewhere? And why does it cost what it costs? Or, right? I can get this app for $4.99 and, you do it on my phone, and right. There's like competition, and
a lot.
Right. And one thing that I think is totally underestimated about TM is I think like most people, I learned back, in my early 20s, and paid to learn, and have never been asked to pay another penny. And I can, come see you. I can use it twice a day. I can stop using it. I can use it whenever I want, once a day, whatever.
Yeah.
For now, almost, 30 years. And so I'm paying way less than $4.99 a month or whatever it costs.
Right.
Because you have it forever once you have it.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe, why TM? How does TM stick out in a crowded space? Or, what are your thoughts about, the other options that are out there?
Yeah. I would say if you look at what we were talking about earlier, this idea that there is a reality to our inner life, and that we're estranged from that reality due to being overstimulated, living in 2024 in the United States, in this country, in this world. And mentioning the election yesterday, I think it's just a good, on a pinpoint. a good indicator of how turbulent and uncertain and anxiety-ridden life is today. So if, as a human being, you look at that situation and say, okay, I know whatever label a person would put on it, the sense, the intuition, there's potential within myself that hasn't come out yet, and I want to enliven that. I want to live life in a way that I'm doing my best and enjoying it. Then how to, meditation is the field for that. And as you're pointing out, there's so many choices. And I think just to analyze, if you take an app that's doing a guided meditation, for instance, then you've got a voice that's saying, imagine you're on the beach at sunset, everything's beautiful and peaceful. And that, on the surface level of the mind, can be calming and settling, and it may help you get to sleep at night, which is no small thing. But in terms of transcending, the activity of the app is keeping your mind engaged. It may be in a fairly gentle way, but it's still engaged. It's less forceful than, a mindfulness technique where you're asked to follow your breath, outgoing breath, incoming breath, and maybe when you've done that for a little while, add a layer of counting. Well, if you just do an EEG on somebody that's doing a technique like that, those areas of the brain that have to do with focus and concentration, they light up. If you're practicing a technique where you have a vehicle for meditation, a mantra, a sound that doesn't have meaning, so you're not busy contemplating, and you're using that sound in a way that is not forceful, then the mind has an opportunity to settle. Now, there may be other practices that take that angle, but there aren't many of them that are visible. Not many, and again, this isn't to say anything against Headspace, Calm, etc., or something on YouTube or a home brew. But when you think of what's at stake, we're talking about human potential, and they say about 80 to 100 billion neurons, brain cells, in every adult's brain. And each one of those brain cells has the potential to connect to up to 7,000 other brain cells. So what kind of network is that? Now, how do I maximize my potential for creative thoughts, for thoughts that are supportive of not only my own life, but life around me? Then I think taking recourse to this level of yourself that is connected to the wholeness of life, not separate from that wholeness, then I think you want a technique for transcending, whatever else you might be doing for focus or concentration. Out, as you know, a side benefit of transcending is that focus and concentration increase, but not during the meditation. So I would just say that I so much appreciate you pointing out what a bargain TM is. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just it's astonishing, and it's not the greatest of business models. Yeah, but it is. So just be clear about. Just be clear about what it is that you want to achieve with a daily practice.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think, for me, from my perspective, there's no, and this is also, I think, a TM component of TM. I think the saying is, you always get what you need. Right. So if you
each meditation.
Right. So I believe whatever you're doing, wherever you start out, if that's walking meditation, if that's calm, if that's, some other technique, I think everybody needs some sort of practice to quiet the mind and to, calm the body. And whatever you're doing is great. And I do think, your point is right. Depends on kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And we're both big believers that this technique is, the one that's going to really, activate the kind of the highest potential within you. So awesome to have you here today with me, and we will make sure people know how to get to you. But as I mentioned before, there's a center here at Gravity.
Yes.
You're doing teachings, you're doing introductions. People can come down and connect with you and learn. You're here in this community, in our greenhouse community. It's a part of living in that community to be able to have access to you and the other modalities. So, I'm super glad that our dots have connected and we continue to be in this journey together. Any kind of final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Well, Brett, likewise, honestly, it's great good fortune in my life to know you, to have this friendship and your support. I think it's accurate. Your support of the human journey and contributing to people finding their best selves in this life is it's something so unusual, and you're really excelling at it. And I think on the announcement for the podcast, the website for TM is the easiest way to get in touch with me. There's a community of people, in a community in a loose sense, because we're not, and I think about that, a community that maybe in these next 4 years will become more active out of response to the time. But the diversity and the number of people, I send out roughly a monthly e-letter that goes out to about 1,600 people. There are a lot of good people in Central Ohio that are practicing Transcendental Meditation, and most of them have come to it in the way that you have, and that is very consciously. And I mean, maybe picking that note, but I want to meditate, and so I would just say and it's fine to look into TM just in terms of, is this the right fit for me at this time? Yeah. And to see if it's the right step. And I want to say that I agree with you that whatever a person's doing for themselves that they feel good with and is contributing to their life, hallelujah.
Right. And
that'll lead step by step to what's right for them as it comes. We're in this together.
Yes.
Good. Brett, thanks so much.
Thank you, Cary. Appreciate it. All right.
All the best.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Gravity Podcast. Please subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about the entire Gravity Project, please go to gravityproject.com. Please check out the podcast on Instagram at The Gravity Podcast. Music heard of the show is provided courtesy of Kyle Lamoro and Oliver Oak.